Okay, ladies and gents, Conor here from CW's Tech Reviews, back with another video. And today we're doing a video, and it's to do with the top settings for the Canon 90D for video. So I recently did the video, and everyone liked the tips, but a lot of people commented and said, hey, can you show us actually how to do it in the settings rather than just tell us what to do? And that's a really valid point, because that's how I actually learn, is by doing it rather than just being told how to do it. So that's what we're going to do today. Top video settings for the Canon 90D. And the first one, I can probably stop recording here. Now the first one I talked about in the video was your autofocus or your focus settings. So you might want to do a video and you might want to use eye tracking for vlogging. And so in your settings here, you would tap your Q button and then go to your autofocus, and there is eye tracking, and then there is spot autofocus, 1-point autofocus, and then zone autofocus. Now I use eye tracking if I'm doing a talking head video, which is this one, and that will follow my eye around the scene, and it's pretty good on the 90D, probably a lot better on like your Canon R5 and stuff like that, but it's good enough on the 90D. Then if I say I was doing something that had a large body that took up the majority of my display, I might use zone autofocus. And then if I wanted to really pinpoint something in my image, I might use 1-point autofocus. And they're the ones I tend to stick to. They seem to get me by through most situations. So how do you get to that again? You go in, press the Q button here, and choose your autofocus up the top here, and then choose which one you want down below. Now there is also manual focus, which is what I do use a lot of the time, which is what I'm in now. You can see the little MF symbol there. I'm in manual focus. And in this situation where I have a product in front of the camera, I'm using manual focus. And you can see on the display that it is yellow, and I'm using yellow to tell me that I'm in focus. Now the next tip that I found really useful, and I need to show you how to activate that, is using the correct settings for your region. And by that I mean, so in the States and on YouTube, a lot of people talk about using 24 frames per second. But if you're in Australia, we don't use 24 frames per second. We use 25 frames per second, 50 frames per second, and 100 frames per second for the slow-mo. So that was really confusing for me, and I was getting flickering lights in my videos and I didn't understand what was going wrong. But then I had to learn to change it. So if I go Q and choose the type of video I want to shoot here, you can see it's got 25 frames per second, 50, and then 4K 25. And if I want to shoot in slow motion, then I can choose 100 frames per second. And that's because I've got my region chosen. So if I go to my settings here in the menu, on the top here, and then scroll across, video system for PAL. And if I go in and change it for NTSC and go back to my video settings, you will see that I can now film in 24 frames per second and 24 frames per second and 29.97. And that's because it thinks I'm now in North America or a different region where they use NTSC. But no, we are in Australia, and in Australia we need to use PAL. So that's important to get that right. If you're in Australia or a country that films under PAL, you need that. That's going to be the best settings for your video. Now the next setting was for stabilization. Now in a standard shot like this, where you're just filming a stationary subject, you don't need stabilization. But if you're out and about, walking, doing talking head videos while you're walking or vlogging, or even filming or doing photography while you're out and about, you might want to use stabilization. And for your stabilization, if I click on my menu button, you can see on the third one down, it says Movie Digital IS. We go in here and it's disabled. We can choose Enable or Enhanced. Now, just have a look at my screen and see how much of my viewfinder is in focus when I choose Disable. Then if I go in and I change it to enhanced, you'll see how much more cropped in it is. It is a lot more cropped in. And then if I go back in and go to enable, it's not quite as cropped in. And then if you go in and disable, it's not cropped in at all. So it's important when you're filming that you choose the right setting for you, and bear in mind that you're going to crop in a lot. So if you're using if I'm using a 24mm pancake lens on the Canon 90D, it's going to be hard for me to vlog on that because it crops in so much when stabilization is turned on. However, if I'm doing talking head video, it's a great lens to use. I'm going to turn it on and the focus is going to be perfect and I don't need that stabilization. So that's really important. Make sure you have the correct level of stabilization for your video that you're shooting. Now the lens also has stabilization built in as well, or some lenses do, so consider that as well. You might not need to use any form of stabilization depending on what you're shooting and how stable your hands are, or your tripod, or your gimbal. Now the next one I want to talk about is about getting your settings right for filming so that you can edit later to get the best image you can out of your Canon 90D or any other Canon camera. And this is important. So if I go to my Q menu, quick menu, you can see here on the left hand side that you can choose auto, standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, and neutral. Now, auto is auto, and once you start filming and becoming better with a camera, you won't want to choose auto. You might use standard, and that gives a really good picture. The colors are great, everything looks great in standard. Portrait's good for your portraits, landscape's good for your landscapes, rah rah rah. However, I use neutral. Then if I go into neutral and my settings, you can see, whoops, it's gone away. That I have my sharpness turned all the way down to 0. I have my contrast turned all the way down to 0. I have my saturation down to -1, and I have my color tone set to level. And then once I film in that, it gives me a fairly flat profile, and I can go in and add the color I want later on in post and get the best image for me. Now sometimes I don't want to do that. I just want to film it in standard and get a nice quick out of camera image, and that's fine, especially for YouTube. But sometimes I do like to play around with the image and adjust it and edit it and play around with it in Premiere Pro, do some color grading and get a better looking picture out of it. So that's what gives me the closest I can to that flat picture profile that you might get in your higher end cameras, which Canon doesn't give you in the 90D range. And now the last tip that I want to give you, and in the video that I did in where I was talking about this, but I didn't show you how to do it, I said this is one of the most important tips, and that is setting up your quick settings, your quick custom function buttons, so that you can just click the button and it's in a certain filming profile that's best suited to you. And I have it set up in 2 ways, and I'm going to show you that now. So if I click over to custom 1, you can see that it's filming now in 100 frames per second, and the video is set to 1/200 at f3.5 and the ISO 200. And that gives me an instant slow motion setting to film outdoors, and I don't have to muck around. All I do is twist this once and it changes like every setting I've got to film in slow motion, and I love it. I think it's really handy and really quickly. And then custom function number 2, I have set up to film in my studio. It's 25 frames per second, f3.5, ISO 100, and it's just set up ready to go for the studio. It's set up for the studio lighting, and every time I film in the studio, it's under these same conditions. So that's why I have it set to that. So if I'm outside doing slow-mo, click. If I'm inside in the studio, click. I don't have to set anything up, everything is ready to go. Now, how do you set that up? So the way to do it is, you get your video settings dialed in manually. Say if I want to go and I want to shoot in 50 frames per second, then I want this set to 100 shutter of 1/100th, and I might want my ISO at 400 to give me a really bright image. Then I would go into my menu go over to my settings, custom shooting mode, C1 and C2. So your settings, menu number 5, scroll down to custom shooting mode, C1 and C2, register settings. So I want to register my settings for custom function button number 2. Camera settings, register camera settings to custom shooting mode C2. Busy, wait, done. So now if I'm in, let's go back to my image. I'm in slow motion, I walk inside and I want to film in a different setting that's already predetermined, and I use that setting a lot. Click over to custom 2 and there we have it. It's filming at full HD, 1/100th, ISO 400. And that will always be like that. Every time I turn it to custom function number 2, it's going to be like that. So that's how I manipulate these settings to get the best image I can out of the Canon 90D. I also shoot with a Canon M50 and I do most of those tips as well with the Canon M50, except for the custom function buttons because the M50 doesn't have it. Let me know if you want to see more tips and tricks about the Canon 90D and how to get the best out of it. This is just a quick one on the top 5 video settings for me for shooting outdoors or indoors. I just need to be able to run and gun and shoot quickly. So I have the correct autofocus turned on, I have the correct type of stabilization turned on, I have my custom function buttons ready to go for different environments. I have my profile set to neutral so I can edit later in post to get the best image. And I have it set, my region set to the correct region for me, not because some famous American YouTuber has a different setting. I use the correct settings for my camera in my region, filming under my conditions. I hope you liked the video. I really appreciate you all watching and I will catch you in the next video. Check ya!